I'm still shaken up, and I hope that by sharing this, I might get some advice or at least find some understanding what happened to me. What I experienced last night was something straight out of a nightmare, and I can't seem to shake it off. Here's what happened. I have been driving all day. It was a long haul from a job in the middle of nowhere to my home. I usually take a shortcut through a series of back roads to avoid the traffic and make it home quicker. Normally, it's a pretty uneventful drive, but last night, that was different. The sun had just set, and it was getting darker quickly. I had about an hour left on this lonely stretch of road that wind through dense forest and barely any lights. I was trying to stay alert, but the monotony of the drive was making me drowsy. I was maybe 20 minutes from my home when my headlight caught something strange. It looked like a person standing by the side of the road, almost like they were waiting for a ride or something. I slowed my truck down, my instincts on high alert. The person was wearing what looked like an old, tattered clothes and was standing completely still. It was so dark that I couldn't make out any more details. As I got closer, the figure turned and started walking into the woods. I thought about stopping to check if they needed any help, but something felt off. They moved too smoothly, like they were gliding rather than walking. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I kept on driving, trying to shake off the unease. A few minutes into the drive, I noticed something else. My truck's radio started acting up. It was picking up static and strange noises that I never heard before. I tried to adjust it, but the static wouldn't stop. Then I heard what sounded like a distorted voices that seemed to be whispering, but I couldn't make any word out of it. I thought maybe it was interference from nearby equipment or something. I tried to ignore it and focus on the road. The woods on either side of the road were thick and dark, make it hard to see beyond the trees. Then I saw it again, the same figure from before, now standing in the middle of the road. My heart skipped a beat. I slammed on the brake and skid to a stop. The figure was just standing there, unmoving. I honked the horn, but there was no response. In a panic, I put the truck in reverse and tried to turn around, but the figure suddenly moved. It wasn't walking, it was more like it was gliding towards me. The face was still hidden in the shadows, but I could feel its gaze. My truck's engine roared as it rolled into a gear and sped away. The road seemed endless. The woods seemed to close in around me as far as I went. The shadows stretching and shifting around my truck. I felt like I was being watched all the time. The radio noise grew louder, and the whispers turned into agonized cries. I couldn't see anything clearly, but I kept feeling like something was darting just out of sight, moving along with my truck and keeping the speed. I finally spotted a small rundown diner on side of the road. I pulled in, desperate for a place to stop and rest. The diner was closed, but I figured I could wait there until I calmed down and keep my nerves under control. I parked near the entrance and sat in the truck, trying to steady my breathing. That's when I heard it, a faint tapping sound coming from the other side of the truck. I turned on the interior light, but there was nothing there. The tapping continued, though rhythmic and persistent. I couldn't see anything, but the feeling of dread was overwhelming. I decided to check outside. I grabbed a flashlight and slowly got off the truck, shining the beam around and looking. There was nothing visible, but the tapping had stopped. I was about to head back inside to my cabin. That's when I saw it. A set of deep scratches on the passenger side door. They were fresh, like they had been made moments ago. I got back in the truck and locked the door. I sat there for what felt like hours, too scared to move. The static on the radio was still there, and the whispers never completely faded. Every time I thought about getting out, I heard the tapping again, always from different spots around the trucks. Finally, as dawn began to break, I mustered the courage to drive off. I didn't stop for anything and took the main highway back home. I'm still not sure what I saw or heard last night. The figure, the whispers, and the scratches, they didn't make any sense. When I got home, I checked online for any similar reports in that area. I found a few threads from locals talking about strange occurrences and sightings of shadowy figures in the woods. They mentioned old stories about creatures that can imitate humans and lead people into the forest. They called them skinwalkers. I'm not sure if that's what I encountered, but the fear I felt was real. If anyone has any insights or has experienced something similar, please share. I don't want to go near those roads again, and I am hoping that by sharing this, I can get at least some clarity. Thanks for listening to my story. Hello guys, if you like this kind of videos and want to hear more, consider subscribing to this channel, and also check out other videos on this channel too. Like them, share them. Now, back to the story. I need to get something off my chest, and this is the only place I can think to share it. I know it's going to sound crazy, but it happened to me, and I can shake the fear from that night. A few months ago, I decided to take a solo camping trip to a remote forest near northern New Mexico. I had heard about this place from an old travel blog. Deep woods, no cell service, a few miles from the nearest town. It sounded like the perfect escape from the daily grind and a great opportunity for some solo reflection. I drove out there on a Friday afternoon, the forest growing denser the farther I went. The road was gravel and twisted through the trees, with barely enough room for one car. I finally reached the small, overgrown clearing where I planned to camp for the night. It was the kind of place that felt untouched by time. Ancient trees, the smell of pine, and a profound silence. I set up my tent and made a small fire. The forest was quiet, save for the occasional rustling of leaves and a distant call of some bird. It was serene, but there was an undercurrent of unease that I couldn't quite place. The sunlight faded quickly, and as dusk fell, the forest seemed to come alive, but in a different way. As darkness settled in, I hear the first strange noise, a faint whisper carried by the wind. I couldn't make out any words, but it was like someone was murmuring just out of sight. I brushed it off as the wind moving through trees, though there was something unsettling about it. I sat by the fire, trying to ignore the creeping sensation that I wasn't alone. The whispers continued, growing a little louder and more persistent. They seemed to drift around the campsite, like shadows moving just beyond the edge of the firelight. Then came the noises from the forest, soft, dragging sounds that seemed to move closer, then retreat, only to return again. The noises were irregular and unsettling too, like the shuffling of feet or the dragging of a heavy object. I tried to ignore the sound, focusing on the fire and the comfort it brought. But as the night went on, the noises grew more intense. I could hear the whispers more clearly now, though they still seemed unintelligible and distant. The dragging sounds became more frequent, more pronounced. So I decided to investigate. I grabbed my flashlight and ventured into the darkness. The beam cutting through the thick shadows. The forest was unweariedly quiet. As I walked, the sound of the fire fading behind me. I was deep in the woods now, the trees towering above and the darkness swallowing the light. The whispers grew louder as I walked, though I still couldn't make out any words from it. It was like a chorus of hushed voices just beyond my hearing. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I moved forward, the beam of the flashlight revealing nothing but more trees and tangled underbrush. I stopped when I heard a new sound, a guttural growl coming from behind me. I spun around, the flashlight revealing nothing but darkness yet again. The growl was closer now, almost as if something was circling me. I started to head back to the campsite, the feeling of being followed growing more stronger and stronger. The growl grew more intense, a deep, menacing sound that seemed to echo through the tree line. I could hear something moving in the shadows, a presence just out of sight. When I reached the clearing, I saw it, a figure standing at the edge of the firelight. It was tall and thin, almost skeletal. Its skin was sickly grey, stretched tightly over its bones. Its eyes were black voids, reflecting the flickering flames of the fire. The figure was eerily still, watching me with an emptiness that sent chills down my spine. The whispers had stopped, replaced by an oppressive silence. The growl was now a low rumble, resonating from the darkness beyond the clearing. I backed away, my hands trembling as I fumbled for my flashlight. I tried to shine my flashlight towards the figure, but the light seemed to dissipate in the void of its gaze. The figure remained motionless, a dark, menacing presence that seemed to grow more threatening with every second passing by. Then the whispers started again, but they were no longer distant. They were right in my ears. The voices were clear now, and they were saying my name. "Come to us," they whispered. "Come and see." I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move or look away from the figure. The whispers grew more distant, filling my mind with a cold, desperate urge to follow them into the darkness. I snapped out and turned to run. Then I stumbling over the uneven ground as I made my way back to the campsite. I could hear the figure following me, moving silently through the forest. The growl was louder now, more aggressive, and the whispers became distorted voices. When I reached the campsite, I threw myself into the tent, pulling the flap shut and zipping it as quickly as I could. The figure was still outside, its presence a looming threat just beyond the fabric of the tent. The growling and whispering continued outside, growing louder and more frantic as the night went on. I huddled in the corner of the tent, tried to ignore the sounds and convince myself that I was safe in my tent. The noises eventually faded. The growl became a distant rumble, and the whispers dying down to a faint murmur. I stayed in the tent, terrified to move or make a sound, until the first light of dawn crept through the fabric. When morning came, the forest was still and silent. I emerged from the tent to find that clearing was empty. The figure was gone, and the forest was eerily calm. I packed up my gear as quickly as I could, my hands shaking with every moment. I left the forest and drove back to the town, not daring to look back at the dark woods as I left. The memories of that night has haunted me ever since, and I still hear those whispers in my dreams. What I encountered might have been a skinwalker, an entity from Native American folklore that uses its malevolence to lure and terrorize. The descriptions I read matched what I experienced: the whispers, the growling, the dark presence. I haven't been camping since that night, and I don't know if I ever will be. The forest holds a darkness that I can't ignore, and the memories of that night are a constant reminder of what lurks in the shadows. If anyone here has experienced something similar or know more about skinwalkers, I'd love to hear from you. I'm still trying to understand what happened and why it happened to me. So, be safe out there. Hope you guys liked this video. If you did, please consider subscribing to this channel enable the bell icon so you don't miss new uploads. And also check out other videos in this channel too. Like them and share them. And if you have any suggestions or any improvements I need to make in this channel, please post them in the comment section. Till next time, this is Malayali Wendigo. Bye.